Is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yeah, you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
you have to talk to Director Patel.
What
I said is that investigation was closed.
If you don't know, why don't you know whether there was a tape and video? Thank you, Attorney General Bondi. I have noticed that at various times when one of my colleagues is pressing you, you come up with something in their background. So I'll be waiting for my turn, but you don't have to do it right now. So let me get to my questions. One of the things that you mentioned, and I agree with this, that it's really tough on the various federal workforce, including our law enforcement folks, who are not getting paid because of the shutdown. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. But I also think that wasn't the whole story. There is an issue here that's going to affect Americans, whether they voted for President Trump or voted for Vice President Harris, and that is the loss of health care, where on November 1st, everyone who is getting Affordable Care Act help to buy insurance is going to get the notice of premium increases. And I got a letter just today from a Vermont family, nuclear family of 5, husband and wife, 54 and 55, with 3 kids, one of whom has acute myeloid leukemia. And the apprehension that they have is that if we don't solve this problem, and November 1 is a urgent date, then their family premiums will triple. It'll be beyond their ability to pay. So I'm assuming that with respect to the threat to health care for families in your state of Florida, in my state of Vermont, you would share that concern and hope that we would resolve that.
Senator Welch, I would be happy to speak with that family too, because there are many nonprofits that help with children with terminal illnesses, and I'm involved in some in Florida. So we would be happy to talk to you about that. As to health care, the government is shut down. It's my understanding, maybe you're not one of them, but because many Democrats want health care for illegal aliens, and that's what shut down the government.
Let me be clear.
That's one of the sticking points, and I don't know if you voted for that or not.
This actually is important to all of us, and the lament I have is that if this health care goes away, this premium support, it is really going to hurt families in red states and blue states. And in Vermont, I mean, we voted Democratic, but we have a lot of good folks who voted for President Trump, and their health care is jeopardized. And there's a November 1 deadline that is coming up. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think it's important for us to try to work out together a resolution that's going to be beneficial to people you care about in Florida and voted for President Trump, and people I care about in Vermont who voted in some cases for Vice President Harris and some for President Trump. So it's not just Democrats not wanting to negotiate. And in fact, we do want to negotiate, and that's why I'd encourage the President to encourage my colleagues on the Republican side to sit down with us and try to see if we can make some progress. Another topic, with the respective voting rights in the letter that your voting rights chief sent out, we got one in Vermont, and it's a demand to get all the information on the voting file. And in that letter, in the announcement of that letter, the chief indicated an apprehension about the voting process being taken over by, quote, the left. Now, do you have any information with respect to Vermont about a takeover of the voting process by, quote, the left?
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. We are currently involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a letter that went out demanding that states, including Vermont, provide all the voting file information,
right.
Includes personal information. But when that letter was sent out—
That's perfectly legal.
But there was an assertion by the chief in this division that this was to deal with the fact that the voting process has been taken over by the left. So we got one of those letters in Vermont. And my question to you is, what do you mean by the left? And do you have any evidence that the so-called system has been overtaken by the left?
We must have fair and free elections.
No, I know that. But I'm asking for the specific basis.
And we will have fair and free elections in this country.
Okay,
Senator, I'd be happy to talk to my chief. Who was it who said that?
It was your chief, which I assume you would know who that is. Here's the question here, okay? There is a point of view that is in dispute here about the fairness of elections. But you have the power as the as the Attorney General to use the authority of your office to make demands on states. And you did that with Vermont. That's within your right to do it. I'm not disputing your legal authority to do it.
Is Vermont disputing turning over the information to our office?
Vermont is. The Secretary of State is. And you can resolve that with her.
And we have every right to have that information,
yeah, here's
Senator.
where I'm going.
Why wouldn't they want to turn it over?
You're a prosecutor with the awesome authority to make the decision that you're going to start an investigation against the state or against an individual. And I know from your experience as a county prosecutor and as the Attorney General in Florida, you took seriously that obligation to have a factual basis before you'd proceed, right?
Senator, I take that role, I take my oath very seriously.
All right, so what I'm
and I
asking,
take fair and free elections in this country very seriously. And that information, our office is entitled to have that information. And we are involved in litigation on that, and I assume we'll be involved in litigation with Vermont.
We have a Republican governor in Vermont. We had our former Republican governor was the treasurer for many years, and also the Secretary of State with election responsibility. What I'm asking is, do you or does your head of this voting section have any factual basis that you can point to that justifies your demand that Vermont turn over all this confidential voting rights information?
Well, it would remain confidential with my office, and you just said that you have a Republican governor, so it doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked that of every state, Senator.
Right, and I'm asking about Vermont and what the factual basis is, but we can move on. You've mentioned that you can't discuss pending litigation, and I think the committee by and large accepted that answer. But I did notice that you spoke at great length about pending litigation, specifically with respect to the questions Senator Cruz asked you about the sentencing of the Kavanaugh defendant. That's pending, right?
He was sentenced to 8 years.
I understand that, but that's on appeal, right?
We will be appealing.
Right, so that makes it pending litigation. So you made an exception with respect to the Cruz questions.
Hold on. No,
but you didn't answer any of the questions that you said were pending litigation from any of my colleagues.
Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing. You're welcome to see the transcript of the sentencing hearing
I understand
with all the
that.
gruesome details of what they threatened to do to Justice Kavanaugh and other justices.
I condemn what that person did.
That was the sentencing.
But the point here is that that's pending litigation. You indicated you're going to be appealing. It's your right to do that. And you would not, you use that justification to not answer many other questions.
Justification? You're an attorney, Senator.
Okay.
You realize that.
I do want to go back to Homan. You know, there's a tape, right, with Mr. Homan? I mean, first of all, is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yeah, you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
you have to talk to Director Patel.
What
I said is that investigation was closed.
If you don't know, why don't you know whether there was a tape and video?
Senator, I believe that was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you think that it is of public interest for the people to know what happened to the 50 grand that the FBI turned over to Homan?
Did you hear what I just said? That was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. That's why I said I would not know.
It's not resolved. There's $50,000. Homan has it, or somebody has it. Do you have no interest in knowing where it is?
You're not going to sit here and slander Tom Homan. The FBI and Deputy Director Blanche said there was nothing.
I'm not slamming Tom Homan. He got the 50
Tom
grand.
Homan is doing, how do you know that? Tom Homan is doing a great job, as our borders are, keeping your border state safe. You're a border state.
Thank you, Senator Welch.
In a tense and confrontational Senate hearing, Senator Peter Welch pressed Attorney General Pam Bondi on several critical national issues, revealing stark contrasts in their views on government accountability, health care, and election integrity. The exchange was marked by pointed questioning from Welch and offensive, often combative responses from Bondi, reflecting the broader political polarization shaping national discourse. The conversation began with Welch acknowledging the strain caused by the ongoing government shutdown, particularly on federal employees and law enforcement officers who were going without pay. He agreed that their situation was unacceptable, but noted that the impact extended far beyond the workforce. Welch shifted focus to a looming health care crisis, the potential loss of Affordable Care Act premium subsidies that millions of families rely on. He illustrated this with a deeply personal example. A Vermont family of 5, including a child battling acute myeloid leukemia, who faced the threat of tripled health insurance premiums if no solution was reached by November 1st. For Welch, this was not a partisan issue but a humanitarian one. A failure to act would devastate families in both Democratic and Republican states alike. Attorney General Bondi's response sidestepped the core of Welch's concern. She offered to connect the family with charity for children with terminal illnesses, but then pivoted sharply to blame Democrats for the shutdown, alleging that they refused to fund health care for illegal aliens. Her deflection reframed the discussion as an immigration issue rather than one about health care affordability. Welch, undeterred, brought the conversation back to the people affected, emphasizing that Americans in both red and blue states were suffering and that genuine bipartisan cooperation was essential. He urged the administration and his Republican colleagues to sit down with Democrats to find common ground rather than prolonging political standoffs that hurt ordinary families. The questioning then turned to voting rights and election oversight. Welch challenged Bondi over a letter her office sent to states, including Vermont, demanding comprehensive voter roll data. He questioned the reason behind this action, noting that the letter's announcement included language suggesting concern that the electoral process had been taken over by the left. Welch demanded to know whether Bondi or her staff had factual evidence of any such takeover. Bondi defended the request as perfectly legal and framed it as a standard measure to ensure fair and free elections. Yet she avoided directly addressing the underlying claim of partisan interference. When Welch pressed for a specific factual basis, Bondi deflected again, asserting only that her office was entitled to the information. Welch pointed out that Vermont's elections were administered under a Republican governor and a bipartisan leadership structure, hardly a setting for the alleged left-wing takeover her office suggested. The exchange highlighted a growing mistrust between federal and state authorities, especially over election integrity narratives often used to justify new oversight actions. Their discussion grew more heated as Welch accused Bondi of selectively using pending litigation as a shield against questions. He observed that she had refused to answer some inquiries on those grounds, but had freely discussed an active case related to the sentencing of a man who threatened Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Welch accused her of inconsistency, suggesting she used the pending litigation excuse only when it suited her politically. Bondi fired back that she was only reciting facts already made public at sentencing, challenging Welch's interpretation of her testimony. The hearing reached a sharp climax when Welch raised questions about a $50,000 transaction involving Tom Homan, a government official. Welch asked whether there was video or audio evidence documenting the transfer and what had become of the money. Bondi repeatedly refused to answer, claiming the matter had been resolved before she became Attorney General and directing Welch to talk to Director Patel. When Welch pressed further, Bondi accused him of slandering Homan, and defended him as doing a great job as our borders are. Welch denied any personal attack, insisted his concern was transparency and accountability for taxpayer funds. The exchange encapsulated a broader theme, a senator demanding clear answers on issues of integrity, fairness, and governance, and an attorney general navigating those challenges through deflection, partisan framing, and combative rhetoric. Welch's questioning reflected frustration with what he viewed as evasive testimony and a lack of factual grounding from the nation's top law enforcement officer. Bondi, meanwhile, seemed determined to maintain control of the narrative, often steering questions away from their substance toward ideological disputes. At its core, this confrontation between Senator Welch and Attorney General Bondi underscored the growing difficulty of conducting meaningful oversight in an era of deep partisan mistrust. Welch's insistence on facts, evidence, and bipartisan accountability clashed with Bondi's reliance on loyalty-driven talking points and political defensiveness. The hearing became not just a test of temperament, but a revealing snapshot of how governance, truth, and public trust continue to be contested in America's highest institutions.